Visceral fat is the most dangerous type of fat because it is not just stored under the skin like normal body fat. It is stored deep inside the abdomen, wrapped around vital organs such as the liver, pancreas, and intestines. Unlike subcutaneous fat, which you can pinch, visceral fat is hidden and metabolically active, meaning it constantly releases chemical signals into the body. These signals include inflammatory compounds and fatty acids that interfere with normal organ function. Over time, this creates a low-grade chronic inflammation inside the body, which is one of the major drivers of many modern diseases. When visceral fat accumulates, it disrupts how insulin works, making cells less responsive to glucose. This condition, known as insulin resistance, forces the body to produce more insulin, which further promotes fat storage, especially in the abdominal region. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where more visceral fat leads to more metabolic dysfunction, and more dysfunction leads to even greater fat accumulation. Because of its location near the liver, visceral fat can also directly affect cholesterol production, increasing harmful LDL levels and reducing protective HDL levels, which raises the risk of cardiovascular disease. Another critical issue is that visceral fat behaves almost like an endocrine organ, releasing hormones that affect appetite, stress response, and energy balance. This is why people with high visceral fat often feel tired, experience sugar cravings, and struggle with weight loss even when they reduce food intake. It is not just an aesthetic issue, but a systemic metabolic problem that silently accelerates aging, weakens immunity, and increases the risk of type 2 diabetes and heart-related complications, making it one of the most important fat types to control for long-term health and survival. Visceral fat significantly increases the risk of diabetes, heart disease, and early aging because it actively disrupts the body's internal balance rather than simply acting as stored energy. When this fat accumulates around the organs, it releases inflammatory chemicals and free fatty acids directly into the bloodstream, which interferes with normal metabolic processes. One of the first systems affected is insulin regulation. The body becomes less sensitive to insulin, meaning glucose stays longer in the blood instead of being efficiently absorbed by cells. This condition gradually develops into insulin resistance, which is the main pathway leading to type 2 diabetes. At the same time, visceral fat contributes to abnormal cholesterol production in the liver. It increases levels of LDL, often called bad cholesterol, while reducing HDL, the protective type that helps clear excess fat from arteries. This imbalance promotes plaque buildup inside blood vessels, narrowing them over time and increasing blood pressure. As arteries become stiffer and more clogged, the risk of heart attacks and strokes rises significantly. Beyond cardiovascular and metabolic effects, visceral fat also accelerates biological aging. Chronic inflammation caused by this fat damages cells and tissues at a microscopic level. This inflammation increases oxidative stress, which weakens DNA repair mechanisms and speeds up cellular aging. As a result, organs begin to function less efficiently over time, and the body loses its ability to recover quickly from stress or illness. Additionally, hormones influenced by visceral fat can disrupt appetite regulation and stress responses, creating a cycle where the body stores even more fat. This makes it harder to maintain energy balance and promotes fatigue, cravings, and reduced physical activity. Over time, this combination of metabolic dysfunction, inflammation, and hormonal imbalance creates a powerful link between visceral fat and long-term chronic diseases, making its reduction essential for maintaining health and longevity. The body can switch into a fat-burning mode through simple daily triggers because metabolism is not fixed. It responds continuously to signals from food, movement, hormones, and lifestyle patterns. When these signals indicate that energy is readily available, the body prioritizes storage. But when signals suggest lower incoming energy and higher demand, it begins mobilizing stored fat for fuel, including visceral fat. One of the strongest triggers is stabilizing blood sugar. When blood glucose remains steady instead of constantly spiking and crashing, insulin levels also stay balanced. Since insulin is a storage hormone, lower and more stable insulin allows fat cells to release stored energy more easily. This shift gradually encourages the body to access fat reserves instead of relying only on incoming glucose. Another key trigger is timing of eating. When meals are spaced in a way that allows mild fasting periods between them, the body receives a signal that it must use stored energy. Even without extreme fasting, simply avoiding constant snacking helps activate this natural fat release mechanism. During these gaps, the body begins breaking down triglycerides stored in fat cells into usable fuel. Light physical activity is also a powerful daily trigger. Movements like walking, stretching, or staying active after meals help muscles absorb glucose more efficiently, reducing the need for insulin and lowering fat storage signals. This creates a metabolic environment where fat oxidation becomes more likely. Sleep and stress levels also play a major role. Poor sleep and chronic stress increase cortisol, which tells the body to conserve energy and store fat, especially around the abdomen. When sleep improves and stress decreases, hormonal balance shifts toward fat breakdown rather than fat accumulation. Over time, these simple triggers do not just burn calories temporarily, they retrain the metabolism to favor fat utilization, gradually improving the body's ability to access and reduce stored visceral fat consistently. Insulin resistance is one of the central drivers behind stubborn belly fat because it changes how the body handles energy at a cellular level. Normally, insulin acts like a key that allows glucose from the bloodstream to enter cells, where it is used for energy. But when insulin resistance develops, cells stop responding properly to this signal. As a result, glucose remains elevated in the blood, and the body compensates by producing even more insulin to force the process to continue. This constant elevation of insulin becomes a strong biological signal for fat storage, especially in the abdominal region. High insulin levels block fat breakdown because insulin's primary job is not only to store glucose, but also to prevent stored fat from being released. When insulin remains elevated throughout the day due to frequent meals, high sugar intake, or processed carbohydrates, the body stays locked in a storage dominant state. In this condition, even if a person reduces calorie intake, the body resists burning fat because hormonal signals are still telling it to conserve energy. Visceral fat is particularly sensitive to insulin dysfunction. As insulin resistance worsens, fat cells in the abdominal area expand more rapidly and become more inflamed. These fat cells also release additional inflammatory molecules that further worsen insulin resistance, creating a self-reinforcing cycle. This is why belly fat often becomes harder to lose over time, even with dieting and exercise. At the same time, insulin resistance affects hunger and energy regulation. When cells cannot efficiently use glucose, the brain interprets this as an energy shortage, increasing cravings for quick sources of sugar. This leads to overeating and further spikes in insulin, deepening the cycle. Breaking this pattern requires restoring insulin sensitivity through stable blood sugar, improved diet quality, and consistent movement, allowing the body to regain its ability to switch between storing and burning fat effectively. Morning metabolic activation is important for fat burning because the body's metabolism is highly responsive to early day hormonal and energy signals. After a night of fasting during sleep, the body naturally enters a low insulin, low glucose state, which creates an opportunity to shift toward fat utilization. However, what you do in the first hours after waking determines whether this potential is activated or suppressed. When the morning begins with light movement, hydration, and nutrient-dense food choices, the body receives a clear signal that energy demand is rising. This encourages a controlled release of stored energy, including fat, to support daily activity. Even simple actions like walking, stretching, or exposure to natural light help regulate circadian rhythms, which directly influence metabolism and fat-burning hormones. Morning metabolic activation also involves insulin sensitivity, which is typically higher earlier in the day. This means the body can process carbohydrates more efficiently without triggering excessive fat storage. If breakfast or the first meal is balanced and not overloaded with refined sugars, insulin remains stable, allowing fat cells to release stored energy more easily instead of locking it away. Hydration plays another subtle but important role. After several hours without water, the body's metabolic processes slow down slightly. Rehydration in the morning helps restart cellular activity and supports liver function, which is essential for breaking down stored fat into usable energy. Additionally, morning routines influence cortisol patterns. Cortisol is naturally higher in the morning and helps mobilize energy. When combined with gentle activity and proper nutrition, this hormone supports fat mobilization instead of fat storage. However, if the morning is stressful or chaotic, cortisol can remain elevated throughout the day, promoting abdominal fat accumulation. Over time, consistently activating metabolism in the morning trains the body to prioritize energy burning earlier in the day, making fat loss more efficient and sustainable. Food timing plays a critical role in fat loss because the body does not process calories in the same way at all hours of the day. Metabolism is guided by circadian rhythms, which control hormone release, digestion efficiency, and how nutrients are either stored or burned. When food is consumed in alignment with these natural rhythms, the body is more likely to use energy efficiently instead of storing it as fat. Eating earlier in the day generally supports better metabolic outcomes because insulin sensitivity is higher in the morning and gradually decreases as the day progresses. This means the body can handle carbohydrates more effectively earlier, directing glucose into cells for energy rather than converting excess into fat. As the day moves toward evening, insulin response becomes weaker, so late heavy meals are more likely to be stored, particularly as visceral fat. Frequent eating or constant snacking disrupts this natural rhythm. When food is continuously introduced, insulin remains elevated, and the body rarely enters a fat-burning state. This keeps metabolism locked in storage mode, preventing the mobilization of existing fat reserves. Allowing structured gaps between meals gives insulin time to drop, which is essential for signaling the body to access stored fat for energy. Meal consistency also matters. Eating at irregular times confuses metabolic signaling, making it harder for the body to anticipate energy needs. In contrast, consistent meal timing helps regulate hunger hormones like ghrelin and leptin, improving appetite control and reducing unnecessary calorie intake. Food timing also affects digestion quality. Late-night eating slows gastric emptying and disrupts sleep, which in turn affects cortisol and growth hormone balance. Since growth hormone supports fat breakdown and tissue repair, poor timing indirectly reduces fat burning capacity. Over time, aligning meals with the body's natural energy cycle helps shift metabolism toward fat utilization, making visceral fat reduction more efficient and sustainable. Fiber-rich foods play a major role in reducing fat storage signals in the body because they directly influence digestion speed, blood sugar control, and hormonal balance. Unlike refined carbohydrates that are quickly broken down into glucose, fiber slows down the absorption of nutrients in the gut. This gradual release of glucose prevents sharp spikes in blood sugar, which in turn reduces excessive insulin production. Since insulin is the main hormone responsible for fat storage, especially in the abdominal region, keeping it stable is essential for preventing visceral fat accumulation. Soluble fiber, in particular, forms a gel-like substance in the digestive tract that slows gastric emptying. This not only improves satiety, but also helps the body feel full for longer periods, naturally reducing calorie intake without the need for strict restriction. When appetite is controlled, the likelihood of overeating decreases and the body is less frequently pushed into a storage-dominant state. Fiber also supports gut health by feeding beneficial bacteria in the microbiome. These bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids, which have been shown to improve insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammation. Lower inflammation means the body is less likely to store fat as a protective response, especially around internal organs. Another important effect of fiber is its ability to bind with certain dietary fats and cholesterol in the intestines, reducing their absorption into the bloodstream. This helps improve lipid profiles and decreases the burden on the liver, which is closely linked to visceral fat metabolism. Over time, a diet rich in vegetables, legumes, fruits, and whole grains creates a metabolic environment where blood sugar remains steady, hunger signals are balanced, and fat storage hormones are reduced. This combination makes it significantly easier for the body to access and burn stored visceral fat consistently, leading to healthier long-term weight regulation. Certain natural compounds can improve fat metabolism efficiency by directly influencing how the body converts stored energy into usable fuel. These compounds are often found in whole foods, such as fruits, vegetables, teas, herbs, and plant-based nutrients, and they work by supporting key metabolic pathways rather than forcing rapid or artificial fat loss. Instead of acting like stimulants, they enhance the body's internal ability to regulate energy balance. One important mechanism involves mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are the energy-producing structures inside cells, and when they operate efficiently, the body is better at oxidizing fat for energy. Natural compounds such as polyphenols and flavonoids help protect mitochondria from oxidative stress, allowing them to function more effectively over time. This improved efficiency increases the rate at which stored fat is converted into usable energy. Another key effect is the regulation of enzymes involved in fat breakdown. Some natural compounds activate lipolytic pathways, which signal fat cells to release triglycerides into the bloodstream where they can be burned for fuel. This process is especially important for visceral fat, which is more metabolically active and responds faster to hormonal and enzymatic signals. These compounds also influence inflammation levels in the body. Chronic inflammation slows metabolism and promotes fat storage, particularly around the abdomen. By reducing inflammatory markers, natural bioactive nutrients help shift the body toward a fat-burning state rather than a fat-storing state. In addition, many of these compounds improve insulin sensitivity, which allows glucose to enter cells more efficiently. This reduces the need for excess insulin production and lowers fat storage signals, making it easier for the body to access stored energy. Over time, consistent intake of nutrient-rich whole foods creates a metabolic environment where fat oxidation is enhanced, energy production is optimized, and visceral fat becomes easier to mobilize and reduce naturally. Chronic stress increases visceral fat accumulation because it fundamentally alters the body's hormonal balance and keeps the metabolism in a constant state of survival mode. When a person experiences ongoing stress, the body repeatedly activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal system, which leads to the continuous release of cortisol. Cortisol is a survival hormone designed to help the body respond to danger by increasing available energy. However, when it remains elevated for long periods, it begins to reshape how the body stores and uses energy. One of the main effects of high cortisol is an increase in appetite, especially for high-calorie, sugar-rich foods. This happens because the brain interprets stress as a demand for quick energy. As a result, cravings intensify and people often consume more refined carbohydrates and fats, which further raise insulin levels and promote fat storage. Cortisol also directly influences fat distribution. It encourages the body to store fat in the abdominal region, where visceral fat is located. This is because visceral fat can be rapidly accessed during stress, making it a preferred energy reserve in evolutionary terms. However, in modern life, this leads to unhealthy fat accumulation around vital organs. At the same time, chronic stress disrupts sleep quality, which further worsens hormonal imbalance. Poor sleep increases insulin resistance and reduces growth hormone release, both of which are essential for fat metabolism and repair. This combination makes it even harder for the body to burn stored fat efficiently. Stress also reduces physical activity and recovery capacity, lowering overall energy expenditure. When combined with hormonal signals favoring storage, the body shifts into a long-term fat-preserving state. Over time, unmanaged stress creates a cycle where elevated cortisol, poor sleep, increased cravings, and reduced metabolism all reinforce visceral fat buildup, making stress management essential for healthy fat regulation. Sleep quality plays a direct role in fat-burning hormones because the body performs most of its hormonal repair and metabolic regulation during deep sleep. When sleep is sufficient and uninterrupted, the body maintains a balanced rhythm between cortisol, insulin, leptin, ghrelin, and growth hormone, all of which influence how fat is stored or burned. However, when sleep is poor or inconsistent, this balance is disrupted, and the body shifts toward fat storage rather than fat utilization. One of the first hormones affected is cortisol. Normally, cortisol follows a daily cycle, peaking in the morning and gradually lowering at night. Poor sleep keeps cortisol elevated into the night and sometimes into the next day. This prolonged elevation signals the body to conserve energy, which increases abdominal fat storage and reduces fat breakdown. Growth hormone, which plays a key role in fat breakdown and tissue repair, is primarily released during deep sleep stages. When sleep is fragmented or too short, growth hormone levels drop significantly, reducing the body's ability to burn stored fat efficiently. Over time, consistent sleep disruption creates a metabolic environment where appetite increases, fat storage rises, and fat burning capacity declines, making quality sleep essential for regulating visceral fat and maintaining healthy metabolism. Light physical activity plays a surprisingly powerful role in fat loss because it works with the body's natural metabolic systems instead of stressing them. Unlike extreme workouts that spike stress hormones and require long recovery, gentle and consistent movement keeps the body in a steady state of energy use, which encourages fat oxidation throughout the day.